And you need to start actually tracking these costs and determining what is and is not legitimate. My favorite story was a Chicago dentist that did 200 procedures in one day. How does a dentist do 200 procedures in one day? You have to be a wizard, right? We don't have any wizards, okay? The other thing that Mark Sanford did was to begin to introduce choice in Medicaid. As Mike Tanner talked about this morning, the key is choice. And the problem in Medicaid is that people don't exercise choice. Medicaid recipients show up in the emergency room, they get the most expensive care, and they impose heavy costs on your budget, and they end up not getting very good care, for that matter. The way you introduce choice in a Medicaid program is to basically set up a health savings account, which is what South Carolina has done, and then Medicaid recipients then are given the choice among various health care providers. And South Carolina invites medical care providers, health care providers, to compete in delivering services to Medicaid patients. And what the Medicaid patients can do then, the preventive care is provided without cost, but the non-preventive care is they must make a choice. And they actually have an incentive to economize and to not spend that health savings account dollar if they don't need the care, and they can carry that over into the next year. You want choice on the part of the consumers of Medicaid, you want choice on the part of providers, and now you're going to start getting some control on costs. We have a modest program in Colorado that's done that. South Carolina and Florida have done that in a much more aggressive way, and that's what Montana needs. Finally, the flaw that is the most difficult, in my view, to address, and that is mandated and earmarked monies. Every interest group, believe me, in Montana, wants to have a privileged position in your budget. And the way they create a privileged position in your budget is to mandate that that money must be spent. In other words, it's not the discretion of the legislature, it's mandated either by the courts, by the legislature, or by the Constitution. And the interest group that's been most successful in mandating and earmarking money is the education lobby, which is the most powerful lobby in this state. And you need to confront the special interests, and you need to confront the education lobby in this state. And this is, in fact, again, Mark Sanford in South Carolina has begun to address this issue. Unfortunately, I don't see much evidence of this in Montana. I think the legislature simply rubber-stamped a 9.4% increase in education spending in this budget. That is an unsustainable increase in spending, and without any accountability. There is a massive literature showing that throwing more money at a failed education system is not going to get the job done. You can enact fundamental reforms in education that do begin to constrain the growth of these costs. And as Tanner has argued, the key is choice. You have to give families choices, whether it's charter schools, whether it's magnet schools, homeschooling, scholarships, vouchers. This is what Mark Sanford has proposed for South Carolina. And a voucher program that is targeted to the failing students in failing schools, that is an approach that's worked in Milwaukee and Cleveland and Florida, and you need to begin expanding the range of choice and giving Montana families much greater freedom to choose how they're going to educate their children, and not just increase the education budget 9.3% year after year after year. Okay, let me stop there and open it up for questions. I think we may have time for a few questions. Carl? Okay. Okay.
Representative Ed Butcher, I have a question here that fits in on this pension funding. Is anyone moving toward the idea of capping these state employee pension funds and shifting it into a 401 type individualized account that they can carry with them from private industry to government and back and forth? and simply when they negotiate their job, they negotiate their salary plus they negotiate their contribution into this pension fund. Is that type of concept being experimented with anywhere to free us out from this constant pressure of dumping more and more millions into these expanding benefit plans on these pension plans of state employees? Because Montana has 7 pension plans.
Yes, in fact, this is of course happening in the private sector, and increasingly it's happening in the public sector. And I'll tell you why it's happening, and that is that GASB sets standards. The Government's Standards Accounting Board has set new standards for state and local government. If you have unfunded liabilities, you have to show this in the debt in your budget. More importantly, you have to show that you're going to eliminate unfunded liabilities over a 30-year time frame. State and local governments are beginning to conform to these standards and report this kind of information. But more importantly, several states, I mentioned Alaska, Michigan, and Oregon, are 3 states that have, for a substantial number of their public employees, new employees must enroll in a defined contribution plan, a 401k type plan, and not a defined benefit plan. Employees who are already vested are given a choice of enrolling in the defined contribution plan, but new employees are required to enroll in defined contribution. I tried to get this enacted in Colorado and spent 6 months fighting our former Governor Dick Lamb, who was in the pocket of the pension fund lobby and so forth, and he was able to block my effort to do this in Colorado. I actually started an initiative process to do this through the initiative in Colorado, and that got their attention, and they did enact some reforms in the defined benefit plan, but we have a voluntary defined contribution. Very few employees voluntarily choose the defined contribution because the defined benefit plan is so generous. But this is happening across the country. Local governments across the country are enacting this type of reform because some of them, frankly, are going bankrupt. And the only way you can avoid that is begin this type of fundamental reform. Okay.
Track except for